All right, now recording. And we are managing teams in Seattle.
Perfect. Virtual now.
Okay.
Used to not be. But yeah, so this is the event, right? Managing software teams in Seattle. This is, I think, seventh or eighth event that we've had. Yeah, super excited to have everyone here.
Whoop, too many slides. There we go.
All right. So hey, we're going to do a quick intro, and then we have Vidal here to talk to us for 30 minutes, spark a good conversation. And then we'll break out and do some small group networking, which is kind of the impetus of this meetup group. And then we'll all come back after we do a Zoom breakout into a large group Q&A.
And one of the goals of the small group breakouts is to come up with one question for your group breakout, or to ask Vidal.
Absolutely. So yeah, meeting logistics. Okay.
The usual.
Everyone's been on Zoom calls, but we're a small enough group here, so feel free to ask questions as you go. If something comes up and you want clarification, don't need to wait to the end. So what this meetup group's about, and a little bit of background is I have a military officer background. I was a C-17 pilot for about 12 years on active duty, and then I transferred over to the Air Force Reserves. In the military, we do a lot of leadership training, a lot of kind of management, professional development. And when I got to the private sector, I didn't see it that much. And as I started a consulting firm helping software development teams become high performing, my team and I found that we were doing lots and lots of kind of leadership talks with our managers and coaching, and really trying to fill in a void where I don't think there's just not enough in the industry out there. So when I met up with Ron, and Ron was saying the same things, and he wrote the book on managing software teams. So we decided, hey, let's kick this off. Let's try to do a meetup where we can bring in other engineering managers for professional development, a place where we can network and learn from others and get some insights to bring back. So, this work is hard, whether you're leading a team in the military or you're leading a team of engineers. There's questions here that aren't necessarily intuitive, that you need some support and you need some mentorship, and this is a group where hopefully we come together and you build some of that. So so that's basically why we're here and what we do. We're hoping to be back in person soon so we can really do the networking, but for now this seems like it's working out okay. So with that, Ron, the co-host of this meetup, I'll pass it over to you. But yeah, super happy to have Ron do this with me, and it's been fun so far.
Yeah. So as Nate said, I wrote the book Managing the Unmanageable, which just came out in its second edition over the turn of the year, after 8 years, and after 4 printings, and after being translated into 3 other languages. I spent several decades in the Bay Area. 2.5 years ago, began split living in the Bay Area in Seattle, and we had developed a very serious software development management community in the Bay Area, and so I was beginning to look around for the same kind of thing here when Nate and I ran into each other, and we started talking about, well, we haven't found one, maybe we should start one. So that was the kind of basis of this. Now the 2 mottos that the community in the Bay Area's got are, one, sometimes relationships last longer than jobs. And in Silicon Valley, this is really true. I think it's a little bit less so in Seattle, but there's still some truth to that. And then the second one is to become the kind of leader you've always wanted to work for. As Nate said, that notion of networking, of mentoring, of building community, of co-mentoring, that's what we're looking to do here, and it's obviously easier to do in person, but that's what we're targeting the breakout rooms for in a little bit after we give Vidal a half hour of initial giving us some input and some insight into engineering manager hiring. Here's the second edition of the book. You can get 35% off with this code at that URL. I'll give you a second to take a screenshot if you want it before I move on to the next slide, because the next slide I'm going to introduce Vidal, who has his own book, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. Software Engineering Manager interview guide, which came out earlier this year, Vidal, or was it late last year?
Earlier this year.
Earlier this year, yeah. And boy, it's got more about interviewing managers, whether it's from the I want to be interviewed as a manager or I want to interview managers. Boy, it's got a ton of stuff in there. I met Vidal at the point at which he was doing the Managers Club. He's still doing the Managers Club. He interviews tons of managers and asks them a whole series of questions. And it's a really interesting site. I'm sure he'll bring up a URL for that because we don't have it on this slide. He's now an engineering manager at LinkedIn. He's been a senior manager, a director of engineering at Uber and Autodesk and Walmart Labs. And he's a fun guy. So I'll let you take it away, Vidal. We're going to break into small groups, and this is what we're going to do when we do that. And you're going to introduce yourselves to each other and ID a top question for Q&A. So with that, let me take this down. Let me stop sharing. I suspect to allow him to share.
Yeah.
No, it should be fine. There we go.
See it now? Okay.
Yeah.
Google Chrome. All right.
Yeah, and you want to blow that up? Put it in speaker mode.
Is it
Yeah,
showing
there you go.
now? All right. Great. So here we go. First of all, thanks for having me here tonight. Thanks. I'm really happy to be here. Glad to talk with you guys. So here's a little bit of the outline, like Ron said, what we're going to cover tonight. So first of all, this is a huge, massive topic. So I'm only going to be able to scratch the surface. There's, as part of the engineering manager interview, there are often coding questions, design interviews, how do you get the job interview in the first place? I'm not going to cover those here due to time. I'm really going to focus more on how to answer some real life questions, typically behavioral interview questions that you're going to get. I understand that the interview process can be difficult, time consuming, stressful, frustrating, and full of disappointment. So I just want to try to make things easier for you. I want to help you be better prepared and for your next interview, and hopefully generate so you can generate a job offer. So then we'll do small breakout groups. You can talk through some of the questions, perhaps, maybe some interesting questions you've been asked, and then we'll do some closing. So the next couple of slides, I'll go over some different questions. What I'm going to share, I'm not saying are necessarily the best answers ever. You might have better answers than me, but I will, because you have a lot of experience, but I will share some tips and what I think are some good answers, and we'll go from there.
So Vidal, do you want to run the poll before we do that?
Sure. Why don't we run the poll?
Okay. Let me bring that up. We're trying to find out which reason you're all here for. Can everybody see that? Can someone indicate that they can see that?
Yes. I can see it for sure.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm a rookie at polling. Okay, answers are coming in.
All right.
We've got 11 of 18 people, 12.
Right.
Going once, going twice. Ending the poll. So let's see the results. Can everybody see those?
Yeah, yes, I do see them.
So more hiring managers than candidates, but more people prepping to interview as candidates than prepping as hiring managers. So it's pretty solid mix, and a bunch of people are both. A couple of people are both.
All right. Well, so I'm going to mainly the stuff I have hopefully will help you in either case, right? Whether you're actually interviewing someone or preparing to be interviewed. I'll just say a little bit about myself. So as Ron said, I'm currently an engineering manager at LinkedIn. I was previously at Uber, Autodesk, and Walmart Labs. And I too was in the military for a while. I was an engineering duty officer in the US Naval Reserve. And I agree with Nate, like there's a lot of training offered in the military, which often you do not see in the civilian world. So I went through this process myself multiple times as a candidate interviewing as an engineering manager. And so I learned a lot of lessons along the way. I made a lot of mistakes, and I'll share with you some of the mistakes I made. So this talk is mainly going to be from the candidate perspective. Again, my goal is to help you do better, generate a job offer. So you'll get that. I do host a website, managersclub.com, because I'm on a mission to improve engineering management. I think being a good manager is a lot more difficult than people think. And I have a huge passion for sharing and teaching as well. So I created this site where I interview engineering managers, try to share best practices. And on this topic of the software engineering manager interview, I also wrote a book this year. It's available on Amazon. Feel free to check it out. You can also buy it on Gumroad. And yeah, moving on. Whoops, what happened? So I'm going to talk about I'm going to go over some sample questions. First, I'll start with, how you should answer these questions. And so I'm going to give a couple guidelines for answering the questions. I think it's important that you try to answer the questions very effectively because you see often the interviewer might not be so well trained. So you want to make sure you get your point across and make sure you give a very good answer to them. So I think the most important thing is to first, whenever you're asked a question, is to pause and think, why are they really, really asking this question? Because sometimes the reason someone's asking the question is not obvious. It's not like what it appears on the surface. And I'll go over some examples of that as I go through the questions. Secondly, I think you should always be selling yourself. The focus should be on selling, like what you can bring this opportunity. And as whatever your achievements are in the past, that's great, but you should know that people are looking to hire you for what you might bring this opportunity in the future. So you always want to be able to sell like your potential and understand that actually the interviewers, for the most part, are looking to buy from you, because the funny thing is most of them don't even want to be there in the interview room unless they're the hiring manager. Like they would love it if you got the job and you could get the job offer and then they could not have to interview for this anymore. So you actually have a good opportunity to sell to them if you can do it the right way. When you're talking about what you've done, I think it's important to focus on your accomplishments and the impact rather than the details. Like we built this website. Okay, great. But what was the impact? Did it drive sales? Did it impact customers? I think that's very important. Most of the time, the questions I'm going to cover, you'll be asked is primarily behavioral questions. And by behavioral questions, I mean things that start with, tell me about a time you did whatever, or, give me an example of something. And so here, I think it's also important to have at least two versions of every story, because if you only have one specific story, you could get asked the question multiple times. And it could be that your answer maybe doesn't resonate with that company or resonate with that person. So having a couple different stories available for each of these common scenarios, which I will discuss, also can highlight the breadth of your experience and prevents a scenario where maybe that one story you tell just doesn't work. at that company or for that team for whatever reason. There's a common method when you're answering these questions, which is what's called the STAR method. You can read about it. Answer situation, task, action, and result. So I'll give you an example of how you could use this. Okay, so you could say, for example, like I would say that when I took over a team, I noticed they took too long to do designs and UX studies. So that was the situation. And my task was to make sure that the team could deliver their work and increase their delivery speed. So the action I took to set up some training on design and best practices. We had regular design reviews with the team. I brought in designers to help the team. And then the result was that the team learned the best practices about design. They got faster, the customers were more satisfied. And so having a story like that, like framing your answers in this format, can be very powerful and concrete. I'll say another thing, you should always tell like the Disney version of the story. So by that, I mean, you want stories that have a happy ending. If the story didn't have a happy result, you probably don't want to share it. And you also kind of want to simplify the stories and remove kind of extraneous details, because sometimes these details can backfire on you. I mean, I can give an example that I used to tell. So I had a story I used to tell about someone that I hired that was a referral, and they didn't work out for whatever reason. And then I call about like how we were able to recover them. But then somebody came up and said like one day, well, wait a minute, like, why were you surprised that they didn't work out? They were referral. If they were referral, maybe did you not vet them enough? Did you not ask them hard questions because you thought they were a referral? And so I realized that kind of like really backfired on me, this detail, because I was like, wow, it was really surprising. I hired this person, they were a strong referral, but they didn't work out. And they were like, well, maybe like you gave too much weight to that. So I actually left out that detail in future versions of the story. I just said, we hired someone and they had these challenges and it wasn't working out, and this is how we recovered them. And I think that is much better to kind of simplify stories and leave out details which could surprisingly backfire on you. I'll say one more thing. Sometimes you don't have a story, okay? When someone asks you a behavioral question, tell me about a time when you had a disagreement with a product manager, for example, and maybe you don't have this story, okay? So a very short answer. So first of all, I don't recommend making up or lying or making up a story. That's never good. But neither is a very short reply that says, well, honestly, I don't know. This never happened to me. That's not good either, okay? So what are some things you could do when you don't have a story? Okay, so a couple of thoughts I have on this is you could say, well, this never happened to me, but this is what I've seen. So maybe you saw this based on what your manager did or when you were in another team. So I said, based on what I've seen, this is how I would approach it, okay? You could also look up, I mean, there are like lots of books now. So for example, like Ron's book is a very good book. You could say, well, I don't know, I haven't run into the situation myself, but based on what I've read and learned, this is how I would approach the situation. And that's much better. It does require some preparation when you don't have a story to tell. I'll start with some sample popular questions. So one popular thing interview will start out is like, tell me about yourself, okay? So this is an easy question because you can give what's called your elevator pitch, right? And if you don't have one, you should prepare one. But you should ask like, why are they asking me this question? Is it that, they didn't read my resume? That's possible. It could be a conversation starter. You're not sure, but think about, why are they asking me this? First of all, I mean, your interviewer is not asking you to rehash your entire resume, because that's not very effective. So you can assume that they can read. So maybe what your interviewer is really asking for here is for you to interpret the resume and tell them what's kind of the bottom line. Okay, so all right, so they kind of want me to summarize it, give them the bottom line. I think you should limit your answer here to about 2 minutes, because if you make your answers very long, you risk losing the interest of your interviewer. So I would recommend going about this, answering it in reverse chronological order. So start by summarizing your last 3 positions, And your aim is to leave the impression with your interviewer of how you've progressed through roles of greater and greater responsibility and achievement, okay? I also think it's important to limit it to maybe the most recent 3 experiences you have, because generally that's going to be weighted much more disproportionate to any like older experience. Like people, it's just my experience, people bias more on what you've done recently. So I think if you go further back, it really doesn't help you. I think you should talk about how your passion aligns with this opportunity. So for example, like something I would say when people ask me this, I'd say, you know, I love coaching and developing people. I love delivering products. You know, I'm a product-oriented engineering leader. And this is one thing that's led me to front end and mobile engineering when I interview for those roles. Why are you interested in this opportunity? Okay. So seems like a simple, straightforward question, right? And so like a weak answer would be like, you know, my friend works here. I heard it's a good place to work. I saw the ad. The recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn. It sounded okay. Those are all very passive and weak answers. So so why are they asking me this question? Really, they're asking you this question because they want to know what's important to you. Okay. So the question is really what's important to you that you're here today. So a better answer would be like, to talk about your career goals and your passion and how does this opportunity align with it. Okay. So you could say, you know, that you, for example, when I worked at like, you know, when I got the job at LinkedIn, also when I worked at Uber, like I'm very passionate about those products and I like creating products that people can use. I like the mission of the company and the opportunity to work, you know, on these kind of products. So I think that's a much better kind of answer to give than any kind of passive answer like, you know, I saw the ad or someone reached out to me and things like that. What are you not good at? So this is a common kind of negative question you'll get asked, like, what are you not good at, or what are your common weaknesses and things like that. So the interviewer here, what are they really looking for here? They're checking for your self-awareness and your ability to, you know, kind of be honest. And they also want to hear that you are interested in improving yourself, that you're someone that's motivated to improve. That you don't think that you're perfect, you know, that you have no faults, okay? But it can also be a tricky question if you potentially could disqualify yourself. They may be looking to see if you'll say something that would disqualify you from the job. So I think you should be careful. You should never say something like, you know, I'm really bad at, for example, planning, administration, giving hard feedback, firing people, meeting deadlines. I mean, these are like core parts of the engineering manager job. And so you could lose the interview right there if you say anything like that, okay? So you certainly shouldn't say anything that's directly related to the job if you're not good at it. And now also you shouldn't try to give like a false answer, something like, you know, I work too hard, you know, I'm a perfectionist. You might actually be a perfectionist, or I have impatience with low performers. It actually could be that you're impatient with them, but these answers actually don't sound legitimate because it sounds like you're trying to make a negative thing into like a positive. And so the interviewer may perceive that you are not being very sincere when you say that. Like, you know, I've given those kind of answers some in the past and they just don't seem to work, or when people tell them to me. So I think it's better that you know, you have to say something. And so I think it's important to say something that you're not good at. I mean, there's things that nobody's good at everything. But it should be important. It's something that you have a plan to improve. And also it should be something that is not a core thing to the job. So you might say something like, for example, you know, I'm really bad at obsessing over PowerPoint presentations. You know, I'm not good at it. I spend too much time on it. I spend too much time looking at for the perfect illustrations and the color schemes and the fonts. So now what I do is like I time box it. Or you could say something like, you know, I'm not really a great, you know, public speaker. I get very nervous and uncomfortable speaking in public. So what I do now is like, you know, I go to Toastmasters and I do things like that to improve my public speaking ability. You know, I go to conferences now and I try to speak. So these are things which you know, again, you have a plan to improve. And I think that's very important. What is your management style? Okay, this is a very broad question you can get asked often. And so, you know, why are they asking this kind of question? Okay, so I think the thing here is the interviewer is really trying to understand if your management approach is going to mesh well with how they understand management works at their organization. And they're trying to see if you are going to work well with other managers in the team. So this can be very difficult because you actually don't know what the management style is at that company, and you don't know and even whatever their perception of it is may not really be the truth. Most likely is not. So, you know, if you just give like some straightforward answer here, it's kind of hit or miss. You know, you might hit on what the interviewer believes is the right management style of the company, or you might miss. And if you miss, then that's not going to be that's not going to go well. So I think first of all, you should take this as an opportunity to engage your interviewer in a discussion about management, and that you have a good grasp of management and what's important about management, and give a confident, well thought out answer about management. So it may not be exactly what they're looking for, but as long as you explain that you have a good philosophy and understanding of management, that's going to be good. So you could say, for example, I like to say is, you know, I think the purpose of a manager is to help the team win. You know, you're kind of like a professional coach, you know, for a team. And I think this is a very good answer. And I think one other thing you should also add to your answer. Go ahead.
Okay, because there might be something
Hello?
other than like how the assignments and the feedback.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing the question. Are you saying something?
I don't think it was a question, but
Okay, so one other thing I'll add, I think it's very important to say that a caveat about you know, that a one size fit all management style just doesn't work, you know, and that it's important to adapt your management style to the individuals in your team. It's totally true, but it's also very consistent with what the management style that you see in US high-tech companies. So again, what is your management style is a good opportunity to discuss what you think is important in management, your philosophy, why you do certain things. And again, you know, it's not a one size fits all approach. I think this is a good way to answer this question. Tell me something that's not on your resume. Okay. So, you know, why are they asking this question, right? You already put everything that's like important and good on your resume. So now why they want something else. Okay. So it could be, so the question sounds innocent, but you should be careful in answering it, that you don't give up anything that could affect you with regards to ageism, discrimination. You know, you don't want to say anything like, you know, well, you know, I love playing with my 6 kids. You know, like I have 6 kids, and it's a truthful answer. It's not on my resume. I don't think that answer necessarily helps you to say that. So here, I think you need to make an informed guess on what you think might, you know, impress the interviewer, right? I think they're looking, if they're asking this kind of question, tell me something that's not on your resume, they're hunting for something else that they want from you. And so you should give them something, you know, hopefully related to a passion of yours that's related to the job, right? So if your passion is, you know, teaching, if your passion is you know, entering some kind of competition, some kind of thoughtful activity, something that make you stand out and be memorable to them, I think this is a much better way to answer that question. So, but you should try to do research on as much as you can, like look up all your panelists on LinkedIn, like before you go into the interview, which is what I do. And here you might this may help you in trying to come up with something when they ask you, tell me something that's not on your resume that you think might, you know, impress them. How do you manage multiple requests to your team? How do you deal with competing priorities? So this happens all the time, actually. Okay, so why are they asking you this question? Because this happens to every manager, like pretty much every day. And so I think what they're really trying to ask you here is, how do you deal with pressure and stress? How do you deal with disappointing people? How do you prioritize? How do you step back and look at the big picture, okay, and work things out. So I think bad answers here all start with negative things. Bad answers start with, well, we need to kind of cut scope always. We need to try to make everyone happy. Peanut butter stuff. Those aren't good. And neither are answers like that escalating all the time. Well, immediately escalate or escalate very quickly. I think those aren't good. You want to see more answers where you can work things out, where you can negotiate, where you can align on different priorities. And so good answers are always much more positive to this. So like, this is a normal thing. This is a good thing that people want more stuff from my team than we can deliver. That's a good thing. Okay. That you're able to say no to people and get them to agree that their thing isn't the highest priority in the organization and smile about it. So I'll give you an example that I'll give you a story that I give, which I think is a very, very good one about this. Okay. So when I was managing my team at Walmart, one of my teams at Walmart at the end at Sam's Club, we had a very clear directive that everyone agreed on. And that was we need to increase the conversion rate on our mobile website. And my team managed a mobile website. And so we got tons of requests for stuff to do on the mobile website. And so what I did is when we got all these requests, I said, okay, what's going to be the impact to conversion rate on the mobile website for your feature? Like, do you have a theory of how this is going to improve conversion rate and how much? Have you talked with data scientists, things like that? And so when people agreed about that, then, as the engineering team, we go back to the team, we get an effort estimate for each of the features. And then we have a very clear meeting where we would analyze the feature requests and say, okay, this is what we estimate is going to be the impact, and this is the effort. And we could come up with a ratio of impact to effort and, have all the product managers there and everyone agree that, yes, in fact, these are the most impactful features. And so that was a very nice way to deal with competing priorities because we were lucky we had this clear North Star. And that worked very well. So I think having a methodology, a way to think about that can be very helpful. This is a very popular question you're going to get if you interview as engineering manager is, how have you managed low performers? Okay, so this is like super popular. And so, why are they asking me this question, right? Well, first thing is they could be thinking there are some low performers already on the team and they want to know what you're going to do when you get there. So, that's possible. But the reality is, like, there might not be any, but there's going to be eventually a case. It happens all the time. We're going to have to manage someone who's not performing to expectations. And so they want to know that you have a way to do this and a way to do it effectively and that you've done it, hopefully. So here, it's good to have a framework on how you deal with low performers, including 30, 60, 90 plans, when, to go on PIPs, multiple stories about when you were able to turn people around who are low performers, and also when you had to manage people out. So I always ask people this question, like, do you want to hear, like, when I was able to turn someone around? Do you want to hear when I was not able to turn someone around? And so that's interesting because you kind of get to know a little about the interviewer, like what they're interested in. Are they more interested to hear about how you turn people around, or more interested like when you weren't? And just having both stories or multiple stories also kind of highlights more the breadth of your experience. So I always ask them, like, sure, I have multiple, unfortunately I have multiple stories of this. So what kind do you want to hear? And so I think that's kind of an interesting way to start it. I'll give you one more tip on this, because this is something that, backfired to me in one interview, is that I was talking about someone. This was actually a really amazing story I have of a low performer, and I could share with you later if you want, and what happened. But it happened many years ago, kind of at the beginning of my career. And so I told the story. And I said, this is a kind of beginning of my career. This was many years ago. I had this thing happen, and I went into all the story, right? And then later I found out that the interviewer didn't like that answer. And I'm like, and they're like, well, because it happened so long ago, they assumed that I hadn't had to deal with any low performers or since then, right? They thought, well, maybe he's not very good at, managing people out or setting the bar for low performance, just because they had implied, just because this story happened a very long time ago, that they were no more current stories. So when I tell a story like this, or lots of different stories, what I'll do now is I'll just leave out the time frame. It's not really relevant to the story. It was a really great story. So that's just like an irrelevant detail that I just kind of leave out now, so people don't assume that. Conversely, you might get a question: how have you managed high performers? How have you managed performers that are better engineers than you, that have more experience than you, that are older than you, that a lot of things that no one will ask that, but how do you manage high performing engineers, people who have just basically more skills and capabilities that you have? And so this one you should have a good answer for too. Like, a bad answer of this is like, well, they're a high performer, so I don't need to spend a lot of time with them. I'm going to spend my time with the people who need help and the low performers. And, it's really great to have high performers because, they kind of are self-managing and do stuff. This is actually a very poor answer. And so, because you can actually have a really good ROI on working with your high performers, because you can get even higher performance from them. You can work with them, find them coaches, find them, mentors and things like that, push them to even higher performance rather than spending your time on lower performers. And so early in my career, actually, I kind of messed this up, and I lost the job on this one too, an interview, because I gave like a bad answer of how I actually spent a lot of time on my low performers. And so I learned from that and came up with a much better system of managing high performers and getting more out of them. I'll go with one more question here. Tell me, whoops, sorry. I actually have a couple more. We have like 1 more minute. Tell me about a project you are most proud of and why. Okay, this is great. You should prepare for this one. And so I'll just say a couple things about this. The specific project is really not that important. Okay, in my experience, the interviewer is not really interested in the specific project. What are they really looking for? They want to understand what was important to you. Okay. So was it important that you achieve some big, result? Was the technology important to you? Was the people important to you? So that's what they're really asking for, is what is important to you in how you see success. And I think one other thing I'll say here too is I think the best thing to have really a good story here is to perform well at your current job, because the better you perform now, the better stories you will have to share when they ask you this question about projects you're most proud of. Another thing I'll say is a common follow-up question you'll get after you tell this amazing, project you worked on and your team executed is, okay, that's great, but is there anything you could have done differently if you had to do this project over again? So I think it's important to also prepare and have an answer for what you could have done better, even though this was a very, very popular experience. With that, I think we're at time for the breakouts. I have one more question we can do afterwards. Do you want to go to the breakouts right now?
Yeah, let's do that. Is that okay, Nate?
Yeah, what were you going to say, Rob? I'll go with you.
Yeah, either way.
Yeah, if you only have
the breakouts.
All right.
Let's do it.
So, and we're going for how long? 10 minutes?
Yeah. So just a reminder, I know we covered it early. So what we're going to do is Ron's going to randomly break out the group. We'll all get into small groups, and really what we want you to do in the groups is introduce yourself. Take a chance to tell everyone your background, why you're here, and then as a group try to come up with like what's the one question you want to ask Vidal when we come back to the Q&A, and then we'll kind of go through group by group and ask the questions that way. So
okay, so we're going to put you in the breakout rooms for 10 minutes, and then there'll be a notice that there's a 30-second timer going, and that'll knock you back into here. unless you come back sooner.
And it's typically right when you really start clicking and start having a good conversation.
Yeah, right.
Pops up.
Always.
So,
All right, here we go.
We could learn from this and do it longer, but that's okay.
Bay Area for meetups too.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
great around this time. So
And this man is the reason why I'm here.
Hey, Tom.
How you doing, Ron?
All right.
Oh.
Hi, Casper.
hi Ron, how are you?
All right.
Ron and I worked on together something called the Silicon Valley Engineering Leadership Community.
Yep.
Yeah, community. I guess it was a commune, circus. It depends on what kind of mood you're in that day. So
Uh-huh. Cool.
yeah.
And what do you do now?
Me, I actually was a director of QA at a place called Tibco Software in Palo Alto, but they basically recently bought me out, and so I basically and decided after I was there for a long time, decided it was time to move on, and I'm actually getting a lot of congratulations from people who I work with. We're glad you left. It's better for you if you were gone. So, but at the same time, the thing I'm suffering from is a break of routine. Basically, I don't know how you work, but your habits of doing things. I'm having to rebuild habits, change things around to rebuild what I do, and get the sense of purpose back again. So it's kind of
Yeah.
I'm kind of repicking that back up.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, for me the same, change. I mean, due to working from home, right? That's for me the big change.
Tom mentioned how many years you were there?
25 years, 2 months.
25 years, 2 months at
Wow.
Tibco. That's a really long time. It's a remarkable.
And the one thing I
time.
would say for a job interview is why I was there for so long. A, I had a good team. We had a team that we worked together very well. We all knew each other. And B, they kept me entertained. About the time I would be like, okay, I should go looking. Something else would come along. Be like, we bought a company, had to manage a new team. We bought a new product. I'm like, oh, I could do that. Or they gave me a timely promotion. So no matter what happened, it just seemed like they would hook me again for another few years. I'm like, oh, okay, I can do this well. And so what else? And we were always on the latest technology. So what else?
Company was good at hooking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Casper, did you introduce yourself?
No,
didn't
not yet. So yeah, I work now for Gates Ventures. Before we also were bought out before it was with Intellectual Ventures. I mean, they sound similar, right? And so now Gates Ventures, breakthrough energy. So I work in clean energy modeling, decarbonizing, all kinds of technologies. I lead a software team that builds tools to study renewable energy integration and reduction of CO2. So yeah, it's a 7 people team. I just finished, hiring 3 more engineers. So very involved with the hiring process. So that topic is very interesting to me, in particular from the hiring side, the hiring manager side. So and what I struggle with is sometimes the assessment of the candidates to be really objective. Sometimes you just have like this gut feeling and that like dominates your decision. I mean, there's always a decision that's made as a team. I involve the whole team when we decide who gets on board, but still make this very objective. So yeah, I mean, yeah. And maybe another point is like, do you give feedback to candidates that, how do you handle some, feedback to candidates that you have to decline? If they come to you and ask for feedback, like how far you go with really sharing like what they have to improve on. That's always a delicate situation.
Ooh, that's a great question to ask Vidal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, Ron, how have you dealt with that? in the past. I'm sure that's
How I know that I've been told by HR that there's no way in hell I get to say anything.
okay.
That's big company response.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Small
that would be-
companies, I don't know that anybody's come back at a small company to ask me why.
As far as I
Mhm.
know, even at Tibco, you were not allowed to do anything like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was more protective, of the corporation.
Yeah, absolutely. But for us, we're a small team, and then and now I have to do the recruitment myself. Also, yeah, like sending, bad message, like just declining people. Before I had HR would do that, all the communication. Now it's like up to me to do that, which put
Oh,
me.
so you would have to be, you don't have a recruiter. to
Yeah,
do it.
so I'm even the recruiter in some sense. Yeah, now before I had HR that would do all that for me. I would work with them, but now I'm also have to do all the communications and
Mhm.
such. So that's
To your previous question, I was sort of astonished listening to Vidal talk about, well, I didn't get hired because of this, or this question, I didn't get hired because of that. And I thought, whoa, he's getting some feedback. So your question would be a perfect question to ask him for advice on.
Yeah.
So I think that would be so. I've heard a great question coming out of our group. Tom, if you want to go with that one, or if you want to pose another one to in contention.
yeah. I can post that one and
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good one. I'll admit my head is a bit foggy tonight. Even though I'm not working, I just wrote a whole bunch of Python code before I came here, and so so my brain is I got what I
That
call.
sounds really fun. Why are you writing Python code?
Well, I was actually working on projects at Tibco to actually, we were actually doing experiments out in Kubernetes in Azure. And I was getting ready to start automating it and writing it in Python. Off and on, I kept getting distracted because I was a manager. So it was always kind of one of those to get drawn out. And then now that I'm out, I kind of said, I still really want to do that. But instead, what I started doing was manipulating AWS instances, basically starting up and imitating essentially, I don't know if you're familiar with the HashiCorp products, right? I played around with a product called Vagrant, which could actually make, start up and shoot up, bring down instances. So I just went out and grabbed some Python libraries from AWS and started, firing up and bringing down instances. So just to keep my hand into it, and why not? This is fun to sit here and code sometimes.
Got it. So back to you, Casper. So what's your approach to recruiting?
Yeah.
Which part of recruiting? So the hiring process.
I'm going to go for finding candidates. How do you find candidates?
I mean, before I said I had a recruiter that would do that all for me, and just like LinkedIn and so on, going around and now it's more like connections that I have, just colleagues and also teammates that bring some candidates up.
What level are you hiring?
So it's mostly what is it, like entry? I mean, not entry level. I would say it's like software engineer 3, something like this, 3.2, and now I have a contractor that I will start as an architect. So he was like a principal engineer in Oracle, and so these are kind of the people. And then my virtual on-site now is like a 3-hour interview. First hour is like meet the whole team, just introduction, question, back and forth. Second is like the technical interview where we go through code that the team has written, and we walk, the candidate has to walk through that and improve it and maybe add something to it. And then we have some more like architecture question. And the last part and last hour is basically it's like a team building activity with the whole team. So we play a game and see how this candidate interact with the team. I just need to make it interesting for the whole team because so many interviews and the team is involved. So need to keep it interesting for the whole team. So adjust it each time we have a different candidate. So the team is also very interesting in joining. So
it's not tied up the whole 3 hours, right? They just come in at a certain point or something like that.
it's 3 hours. Yeah.
Everyone for 3 hours?
Say again?
Everyone for 3 hours? The whole team?
Like we have 3 stages, right? Like first I meet with the candidate. If it's okay, I go further with only the software team, which is 7 people. And then the third step is then this 3-hour interview. And I only I had like 10 candidates maybe for 3 positions that went all the way. Like 10 interviews for 3 positions that were like 3 hours. Others, they like went, didn't pass the second or first step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, this must get choose up a lot of your time, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a huge investment. And I don't have a lot of people that help me with this, like HR or like filtering out candidates. I mean it's a lot of time I invest in this. I mean, considering like using a company that helps with that as we go forward. But right now I'm happy with the people that I have. Yeah.
That's quite the contrast with what we were doing. We would have a recruiter who would in-house recruitment who would actually send us resumes based on what we put up as a position. I would usually talk to them on the phone ahead of time, or if they were local. Or then we would, if I liked them in the talk, I would bring them in for an in-house interview or expand it out to have like a Zoom session. I guess it'd be a Zoom session now with the rest of the other team members who I thought they'd be interacting in. And then we would have a chat. And it might take like a morning or something like that, but I wouldn't be tied up for hours at a time like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah, you're right. Just when we got gelling there.
Yeah, that's right.
Every time.
Yeah.
Like the algorithm in Zoom, it identifies with AI that you're gelling, and there's like, oh, time for 30 seconds.
Stop, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, who was it that predicted that? That's his fault.
Yeah, that was me. All right. We'll
Okay.
go with 15 time around.
Okay, so let's go with querying Vidal with all of our questions. So group 1, that was Andy and Aaron and Brian.
Yep. So, what I always encounter is the role of a manager in an agile organization. And I guess if you're, interviewing, or how do you respond to that kind of a question of what is that role of a manager when you have agile teams and, self-organizing and, give them a direction, let them go, figure it out.
That's a great question. I pondered this. In fact, Ron has a fantastic answer to this. I think he actually wrote, I know he wrote a piece. I know he's given a talk on it. And I think there's even an extra chapter in your new book on this very topic, right? Because the team is ideally self-organizing, right? And the manager doesn't need to be the manager can focus more on, making sure the right people are on the team and their career development and stuff like that. And the team is responsible and they're on the hook for, the delivery and the execution. So I probably let Ron say more on that, but I'll just say in my experience, I've heard people say that, and I've worked at companies where they kind of say that, but boy, I've never seen a place where the engineering manager is really off the hook for those things, like they always seem to be on the hook at the end of the day. So anyway, Ron, do you want to say anything on this topic?
I'll just make a note that most teams actually will happily delegate handling problem employees to their managers, regardless of whether they're agile or not, regardless how far down the path of self-organizing they are. They'll almost always delegate handling problem employees to managers. And in the hiring realm, there are very few. We were in our breakout room talking with Casper, who's doing a lot of the recruiting work himself. There is a huge amount of legwork involved in recruiting, and for the most part, teams would rather have managers do the legwork as well.
Thank you.
So team 2, room 2, Bobby, Malika, is it Malika or Malika? Malika, I'm thinking.
Yes, that's right, Ron. Thank
Malika.
you.
Malika. Nate and see, I've got part of names covered up here. But room 2, who's asking the question?
Yeah, so our question was more on the interviewee side. So in that, typically at the end of an interview, there's 10 minutes where you let the candidate ask questions. And we're just wondering, during that 10 minutes when they're asking questions, is there still something that the interviewer is looking for, that maybe the questions that the candidate asks should be more targeted in a certain area? Like, should you stay away from company questions that maybe arguably are on the website or aren't on the website? Should you stay away from those and target questions that are more personal to the actual interviewer? Or should you really be focusing in on company dynamics? Like, where should those questions be focused? If you had any feedback on that.
Yeah, in fact, that's funny because our group had kind of the same question. Actually, I actually have a slide prepared on this, but I can just tell you. So I think, first of all, so do you have any questions for me at the end? Is that that's great. Okay. But why are they asking you this question, right? I think the reason they're asking you this is what is important to you. Okay. It's another way of saying what's important to you. So for example, a bad answer is if you say like, tell me about the vacation policy. Tell me about, pay and things like that. That's immediately, you're there for kind of like the, not the good reasons. And you are going to be evaluated on the questions you ask. So another terrible answer is like, I don't have any questions. The people ahead of you already answered my questions. Doesn't matter if they answer the questions. You can ask the same question again because you might get a different answer, right? You don't have to say that. It's like, oh yeah, I have a couple questions for you. So that's a thing. But I'll say a couple other things about this, which I think are good. So before I even tell them my question, you see, the whole interview, for the most part, they've been in control of the conversation, right? They've been asking the questions, okay? Like, Al, tell me about this, tell me about a time with that, how do you approach this thing? And now for the first time, you actually are kind of in control because they're saying, what questions do you have for me? So one thing I always do is I always like to, thank the interviewer for their time, right? I'll say, thank you so much for having me here today, having the opportunity to talk with you. And what I'll do is a little bit like, I'll give like a little bit of a closing argument. I'll say like, I'm really interested in this position. I think it'd be a really good match because of these, these things in my background, which match up well with the job description. This is kind of my passion to do this stuff. And maybe there's something they missed on my resume, which I believe would be important. Like they didn't get to ask it because maybe they weren't that effective interview or they just didn't know. I might say, maybe you're not aware, but I actually have this qualification or this experience. I just wanted to make sure you knew about it. I mean, don't take too long with that, like no more than maybe 2 minutes. And usually you don't have more than like 5 minutes left before this line of, you get the opportunity, but I always kind of like say a few of those things and recap them. Okay. So now we're actually going to ask a question to them. Okay. So first of all, don't ask anything negative about the company. Don't ask about anything like you're just going to put your interviewer in a negative state of mind. So you actually want to ask like something that puts them in a positive state of mind to end it on a positive state of mind. So there's 2 approaches you could take. Okay. One of them could be ask them like, simple things like, what do you really like working here? What was your biggest success working here? What's the thing you're most happy about? Something like that, so they at least leave the interview room and the interaction with you in a positive state of mind. So I think that's a good, a reasonable line, okay, as opposed to a negative state of mind if you ask anything negative, about the company. But I think even a better state of mind to leave them in is to leave them thinking what it would be like if they actually gave you the job offer, right? So you could ask something like, if I were to start here, what would be your advice? What's your advice to new hires? So now in their mind, they have to at least imagine that you are in the job, right? So that's kind of good. You could say, what distinguishes successful managers here? You know, what distinguishes the high performers from the low performers? You know, for me to be a high performer, you know, what would I have to do? Or this other kind of question, you could say something to the effect, okay, you know, assuming, you know, whatever I get the job and, you know, we're having this meeting, we're meeting for lunch a year from now, you know, what would have to happen for you to think that, you know, this was a success? You know, that might be a better closing question for like, if you're meeting the actual hiring manager, you know, like, you know, if you were to look like, let's go forward a year and now look back in time, what would be the things that I would have to accomplish for you to, you know, have said this was a, you know, a good hire, or that we worked well together or something. Again, putting them in that state of mind where they're kind of thinking that, you know, you're the one. So that'd be kind of my approach to answering those questions.
All right, so let's go to room 3. That was Doug, Jean, Meng, and Pavel.
Yes, the question that we came up with is, what aspect of your job are you most passionate about?
Oh,
and
okay.
There are some various reasons for this, but I just, yeah, maybe let.
Well, I mean, obviously it's gonna vary per person, you know. So whatever, you know, you're actually passionate about. Some people are very passionate, you know, they're passionate about different things. You know, I would give an answer that, you know, I'm very passionate about, you know, developing, coaching people. You know, these are things that managers do, right? You develop people, you train them, you help them grow in their careers. These are all very good. I mean, they're good reasons to be a manager. I mean, I think that's just kind of like a good solid answer, right? You love coaching people, developing them. You like getting stuff done through other people. You know, when you have a team, now you can have more, you know, you can have more impact. You know, I think, well, there you want to be a little careful, because you can also give answers which could be interpreted negatively. Like, you know, like if you say like, you know, you want to have a big team to have like a big impact, people might think, well, you know, you want to be like an empire builder or something, you know, like, so I think you want to be like kind of careful how you phrase these questions. But I think a good line is like, you know, that you like, if you do, I mean, of course they're asking you, so, you know, you have to give, you know, what you think is important, but I would say something about coaching, developing, inspiring people, things like that, to do more.
All right, so room 4, Casper.
Yes. So I was with Thomas and Ron, and I'm currently or I just finished a round of hiring, and I'm in a small team. So I besides being hiring manager, I'm also kind of recruiter. And my question is about how do you answer feedback feedback requests that comes, say, after an interview from a candidate, maybe you declined. I know big companies, you know, have some policies, but, you know, for me, I have kind of, you know, do I ghost them, or what's my strategy here?
Okay. So generally, yes, you're right. Big companies, like the recruiter handles that. And the recruiter is the one who tells the candidate that they didn't get the job. And that's part of the recruiter's job. So they're very happy to do that for you and tell them the bad news. And often the recruiter won't give the candidate like any feedback, you know, like so I have met managers who, and I've done this sometimes, okay, maybe against policy. Like if there's a candidate, like, what I think is important. So I have gotten feedback on interviews that I've done, and often I don't get any feedback. But if you're able to build a good rapport with the recruiter, right? If you're able to build a good rapport with the people on your panel, okay, it is possible that they may give you some feedback, right? Like I have given feedback to people that, you know, because I was really, you know, I was rooting for them, you know, I was rooting for them. I thought they were, you know, they were very, you know, communicated well. It's just, you know, for whatever reason, it didn't work out. Like sometimes it really has nothing to do with them even. It's like the job rec got closed and now we can't hire anymore. or they were just another candidate that was better, but I thought they were outstanding anyway, and they were just an inspiring person. So, you know, if you comport yourself well, then it's possible you might get some feedback from them. Again, no guarantee. But as the engineering manager, I mean, I know some like I honestly, I don't do this, but I know some engineering managers. I know at least one or two who they will tell every candidate themselves, right? Like they won't let the recruiter do that. Okay. And that's tough, right? They actually call the candidate and they're like, you know, I have to tell you didn't get the job and this is why you didn't get it. Okay. Like that's pretty awesome if you can do that. Okay. I don't know if you can do that at some big companies, but I know some managers who do that, and I have a lot of respect for that because they'll just say like, you know, you need to develop more in this area, you know, and I'm sorry, we cannot offer you the job at this time. And I have told that to candidates sometimes, but I don't do it for everyone. Yeah.
So room 5. So that's Akko, Pete, Travis. That was Vidal's group, and Alfonso.
Yeah, so we had a similar question which was asked before about what is a question for you or for me.
Yeah, we had that, and which I answer, but I'm happy to answer more about it if people want. And then we also had kind of similar to the last question, like how do you get feedback on the interviews? So one thing I'll say here is, yes, you're really flying blind as the candidate. It's very hard to get feedback. Most people won't give you any feedback. So one thing you can do is you can do like mock interviews. Okay, you can pay people. There are people online who will do an interview and they'll charge you money. But you can also get like friends of yours, and I've done this for friends of mine, where they're interviewing for a position, and I've just interviewed them and I've given them feedback, and I said, you know what, I didn't love your answer to this question. This is why I didn't love your answer, or this is how you might make it better, you know? Or they're like, I have 2 different stories to tell. Which one do you like more? And I said, well, tell me both. Like, oh no, I like the first one a lot more than the second one. So you can get feedback like from, you know, friends, you know, or, you know, strangers, if you pay them, that'll do mock interviews for you. So I think that's a good thing. I'll just give, so
I'm going to throw in a question here to ask you to address thank you notes, Vidal.
Yes, thank you notes. I've actually spoken with a bunch of my friends who are recruiters, and my oldest daughter is a recruiter. Okay. And I asked her, I said, you know, tell me what's the deal with thank you notes? And here's the thing. The thank you note is like, if there's no thank you note, it'll be noticed that, gee, there was no thank you note. Okay. So that's like a negative thing to not send one at all. But there's really nothing in the thank you note that'll change the outcome. Okay. So I recommend you do not spend much time writing the thank you note other than just sending one. So it can be very brief, you know, like, and I actually have a template in my book that says, you know, thank you so much. It was really great to meet the team and, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's a very nicely written thank you note. But the thank you note, I don't think will make a difference except if it's not there. That's what I've been told by a lot of recruiters I've talked to.
Great. Other questions?
Well, so to go along with the thank you note, is it a physical letter note or is it email or?
No, I think email, because a physical note, like it may just take too long to get there. Like you want to get it there right away. So I will send the note to the recruiter. If I have the email addresses or I can guess them of the panelists, I'll send it to them too. So they'll have it before they write their feedback. But again, I mean, a lot of us have done interviews, and a really nice thank you note is not going to change a no into a yes, you know, realistically. Okay. But the lack of a note or a kind of a rude note or something might take a maybe to a no, you know, or something like that. That's my view of it. So I don't spend a lot of time on it, like quick thank you note and then move on to the next interview.
Great. Other questions?
Maybe, yeah, kind of along that line, but cover letter, like I have seen in recruiting, like if I get cover letter, I read them because they're so rare, even though they're asked for. So I wonder what would be your suggestion for cover letters? Write them or not?
And along the same lines, because like since I'm out looking right now, I've only had one site of like I haven't done very much looking. Only one site asked for a cover letter. I was very surprised. Everything else is just submit. And so I've been very surprised at how little people are asking for cover letters.
Yeah, I remember back in the day, like cover letters. I don't think I really see cover letters anymore. Like when I did my last couple interview cycles, I don't remember sending any cover letters to people. Like people will mail. I think rather than writing a cover letter, I think you'd be better served by spending time like on your LinkedIn profile. And I'm not just saying this because I work at LinkedIn, because I believe this before I even worked at LinkedIn. Like that's like a lot of recruiters search for people primarily on LinkedIn. So your cover letter can be like your LinkedIn profile, you know, having your profile very up to date, having good descriptions of what you did, having the right keywords there, because a lot of it's just done on keyword searches, honestly. So I think if you have a good looking resume, like where you could maybe have a cover letter is like, this is where I think it can be useful, is like getting in as a referral, I think is very important. I didn't talk about this yet, but to get the interviews, like it's so much easier to be a referral. So if you get someone to refer you in, then when you send your resume to this person at the company that's going to refer you, right? Like say you have a friend that's going to introduce you to someone, or send your thing on to the hiring manager, then having like a nice note kind of cover letter there might be good, you know, explaining like why this is coming in. But I personally don't think, I think cover letters are kind of something of the past, let's say.
Well, thank God I didn't have to write another document.
Yeah, I would spend that time on the link. Make your LinkedIn profile really good, really good.
Yeah, I got to drop off. I want to thank everyone, and I'll catch you next time. I apologize. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
So, Vidal, I have one more question.
Sure.
We have time. We talked in our group a little bit about trying to get off the script a little bit, like a strategy where you have the interviewer put away the canned questions and you kind of get to more of a conversation. What are your thoughts around trying to do that, or having that as maybe like an objective?
Well, I don't know about that, because I think that in a well-run interview, a well-organized interview, each interviewer is sent in to collect specific information. You know, like interviewer one may be sent in like to get information on your project execution skills. Interviewer two may go in to ask about career development. Interviewer three might be asking you design architecture questions, right? So I think they're all going in asking if it's done well, okay, each interviewer should be tasked to collect certain information. So if you get them off script, then what will happen? They won't have this information, right? Potentially. So I think it would be better if you can identify what the information is that they want and make sure they have it, right? If you can identify, like, why are you here, right? Like, oh, this interviewer is here to ask me about my leadership skills. Okay, let's give them tons of leadership stories. And, maybe once they're satisfied that you've demonstrated leadership skills, then maybe you could take them off topic, but I wouldn't want to take them off topic until I know they got what they came for.
I would agree with that. Like I'm at Zillow, and we go in with, we're looking for core values, and we've got questions specific to that. And if the interviewers are doing their jobs well, like we should have rubrics for what a great answer and a medium answer and a not great answer looks like. And, we each go in looking for, kind of predetermined things. And like I've had interviews where I've been a no hire because I was like, it was a fun conversation. I liked the person, but like, we didn't get to any things, that I was looking for. And like that, and it's so frustrating. So for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents.
I actually had a slightly different point in our conversation, which was, as the interviewer, I'm trying to get the interviewee off of their canned answers. Not that I expect to get off my questions. So when I feel like I'm getting pre-prepared answers from the interviewee, I'm working to get them off of those canned answers because they're overly prepared, and I'm trying to make sure that there's actually substance behind their answers, and they're not just cribbing off of somebody, somebody else's, basically somebody else's experience. The point generally that I was trying to make was that I think your tips are really great for a good manager who is not a good interviewee, right? Doesn't have experience as an interviewee. But if you're not a good manager and you're going to try to use these tips, a good interviewer will be able to see through them.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying like, yeah, yes, I think that's fair. That's fair. If you're not a good manager, I mean, it's going to show, right, in these questions. Right? You can ask behavioral questions. So I'm just giving you advice and, how to approach them, but you have to have some substance. You have to have some experience, right, to talk about.
I'd have to say most of the time, good interviewers aren't fooled.
Yeah.
I haven't been fooled once.
I mean, it's very difficult in, say, 45 minutes to an hour to really, know anyone, right? And so, it's people have this idea they can go in and they can have like a really, with all due respect, like it's very tough, right? It's very tough to get the right signal. So that's why you have like, I think Andy's point, you have like rubrics and you're kind of looking sort of specific. That's why people are trying to make it a little more objective, but it's really difficult, really difficult.
So Vidal, I'm curious, you said if it's a well-organized interview team, what percentage of interview teams have you experienced are well-organized?
Very low.
Yeah, I think it's low. Well, it also depends what kind of companies you're interviewing at too, right? Like I think if you're interviewing at more established companies, like they have probably more processes and they have more training and, like they're probably more well-structured, right? But if you're interviewing at like smaller companies or they're not going to be as well organized. I think it's going to depend. But like, some companies like, I don't know, big top tier tech companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, stuff like that. I mean, they have pretty well structured interviews, and like they're coming in looking for specific things, each of these interviewers, and they've been to some interviewer training, before they're even allowed to interview people. Whereas some other companies, it's just like, they just throw someone in the interview room and say like, go review.
How is LinkedIn's? I imagine LinkedIn's is probably pretty good. I mean, it's kind of the, how is it? LinkedIn?
Yeah, no, LinkedIn is a well-defined process. I mean, there's training, there's a bunch of interview training you have to go to. There's questions, there's like prepared questions and information, so you don't have to like make up your own questions. There's a lot of companies have like approved questions, you need to ask from like an approved questions list. A lot of places I've worked at. There's I mean, there's a structure to it. People have to also at the best companies, people have to like interview, but then under like kind of like, in the military, right? It's like you're under instruction, right? Like you're interviewing and then you're shadowing someone, and then once you've interviewed a certain number of times, then you're allowed to interview on your own. So a lot of times you'll see, like you go in an interview room at some of these top tier tech companies and they'll be like, oh yes, I'm just here shadowing, I'm the apprentice interviewer. And then, it's a place where all the interviewers having at least some kind of training and process to follow. So
Amazon has bar raisers even. So you do the whole thing. And then there's a whole other tier of folks who are involved in every interview whose job it is to make sure that the standard is being upheld across somebody who's not affiliated with the team at all. So they don't care if, they're under no pressure to actually hire somebody. So their job is just to make sure in that interview that the candidates that are being considered meet the bar at the company for that position.
That's correct. Yes. A lot of companies have like bar raisers, and that's that a lot of companies also have hiring committees where they also have to review like whatever the panel says.
Other questions for Vidal? Doug?
Okay, so I can put up my whatever.
Is that a question, Doug?
Sure. So later this week, I have a couple of CTO interviews. I wonder if you have any special advice for that. Anything be different?
I don't, but maybe Ron does. I've never, yeah.
And then I have a second question also. Ron?
Well, as a CTO to start it, but anyway, Ron could probably answer this better.
You know, the questions change with the expectations of the role, and the higher in the organization you get, the more expectations there are. The expectations of the role at a higher level are they're more corporate. You're expected to be part of the corporate team. You're expected to be part of the executive team. You may be reporting to the board. It may be about actually maybe about gravitas, and do you have it or not? The ability to represent the organization and then there'll be questions around probably for CTOs, questions around architecture and technology choices.
Right.
That are way higher level than a first level manager.
That part is no problem. So my second question for either of you to answer. So in the next 2 days, whose book should I read? Yours or Vidal's?
Oh, you should read Vidal's.
No,
You're going into an interview? That's called cramming.
You're very kind, but you know, Ron's book is an amazing book. It's like one of the classic key books for all engineering leaders. So, and I love the title of Ron's book too. So I would recommend you read Ron's book. But if you're interviewing in the next 2 days, sure. You read. Mine's short. Mine's only like 50 pages, 60 pages. So you can actually read it very quickly.
Thanks.
Vidal, you had promised, well, you mentioned that you could tell us a story towards the end about the, I think it was managing a low performing employee. It was a great story, but early in your career.
Oh yeah, I thought this was a great story. So there was a engineer that worked for me, and yeah, this guy was also a referral, but I don't give that detail anymore. And he wasn't working out, and he go like there were just tons of errors like in his code, and I would spend time like what is going on, and there was just tons of rework required, and then his friend that referred him in, it's like, what's going on? Can you coach him? It's like, yeah, and I don't know what's wrong with my man. It's just not working and all this, and it was just bad. And so this was so I was working at a small company, so I didn't have a lot of HR process. So one day I was just like, I'm sorry, like you're fired. Like I gotta let you go. Like this is just not working. So I just let him go, and he was not happy. And so here's the punchline. So this was about like maybe 7 or 8 years later or something. I'm at a conference and I'm walking through this hotel, the hallway, and here I see this guy walking towards me, and he's a big guy. Okay, much bigger than me. I mean, he's like 6'5" or something, very tall. I'm not, I'm like 5'8". Okay. And the last time I saw him, he was quite upset at me. Okay. And here he goes walking the other way. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Cause I can't turn, I'm not going to turn around. We're just walking down this like very narrow hallway. And so he gets right up, like we're passing it, and he stops and he goes, Vidal, do you remember me? And he's like looking down at me. I'm like, yeah, I remember you. He goes, that day, like you fired me and all that. And I go, yeah. He goes, I was really angry and all that. And I go, I know. He goes, but it actually was the best thing you ever did, because, I really was slacking off, and it really was a wake-up call for me. So then he started telling me after this wake-up call what he ended up doing with his life after that. And he's like, now I'm like an engineering manager at this like big name company. And I'm actually like doing all this like writing and podcasting and crazy stuff like that. I'm like, wow. Like he totally, it was very amazing. Okay. Like his transformation. And so the lesson there is that sometimes it is the best thing to like let somebody go. Like that didn't work out in the short term, but for him, it actually was really good experience. And it was difficult, but you know, it worked out well, let's just say in the end. And yeah, I talked to the guy and it was just really interesting. So
cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you all for joining us. A round of applause. I think this is American Sign Language for applause. Round of applause for Vidal. Thank you all. Nate, any last words?
No, thanks again, Vidal. Appreciate it, and everyone. Thank you for jumping on, and you know, keep your eyes out for the next one. I think we'll keep doing these.
My contact information is here on the screen. If you want to reach out, like, go ahead. Happy to talk more. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.